my fellow beings. My name is Amanda, and today I am going to be telling you a story. I was doing research on medical trauma, and eventually there will be a video on medical trauma, but every time I would read something, it just sparked another story in my head that had happened to me. And so I decided that to make things easier on myself and to entertain, because now that it's been so many years since this experience, I can talk about it and find it funny. When it happened, it was not funny. So, trigger warning, if you have issues with medical trauma, this may not be the video for you. So, it's okay if you click away and don't want to hear the story, because I understand the medical trauma is a real thing and I don't want you getting triggered by something I'm about to say. So, this happened around 2007. And I was in another country. Now, I'm not going to be mentioning which country it is because I don't want anyone to think anything bad about the country that I'm talking about, because I absolutely love this place and I don't want people thinking that it's a horrible place because of the experience that I had. So we're just going to say a foreign country. I was outside of the United States and I was living overseas, and I got really sick and we couldn't figure out what was going on. And so it got to the point where I decided that I needed to go to the hospital. And I asked around a bunch of friends in that area and asked which hospital was the best one to go to, and I was told which one to go to. And my friend and I went, another American and I went to the hospital. I had a friend that was from that country also come, because there were medical terms that I probably wouldn't be able to understand because I knew the language but not medical terminology, so I had her come so that she could explain words to me that I didn't know. And I first get there and I tell them that I'm having a hard time breathing. It's when I'm eating food and all of a sudden I have a hard time breathing. When I tell them that, they get concerned, so they take me into a back area and they want me to go into a room with a bunch of half-naked men. So there were a bunch of men in this room. There were no women in this room. It was just a bunch of men. That gowns weren't a thing in this country. Like, you didn't get a medical gown. You just wore your normal clothes, or you didn't wear anything. So there were naked men in this room that had blankets covering their privates, and I look in this room and they're like, we're going to put you in this room so that we can monitor you. And my friend looks at them and she's like, she's not going in there. Are you insane? And and they wouldn't let my friend come in with me because she wanted to sit with me, and they wouldn't let her come in. She was getting angry because they wouldn't let her into the room. So I asked them if there was another place I could go that didn't have this many naked men in it, and that my friend could be with me. And they're like, yeah, there's a place that you could go. And they put me on a gurney and put me in the hallway. So I was on a bed in the hallway, and there was spit on the walls. There was puke on one of the other walls. There was some kind of dark fluid on one of the walls that we're assuming was old blood, but we're not 100% sure. Could have been iodine for all I know. But it looked like old blood that was on the walls, and it was just really gross. And my friend was taking pictures of everything because she was horrified by everything. Now I'm laying on this bed, and the doctor comes over to me and he's like, I need to get some blood from you. And I'm like, okay. So I, put my arm out like, okay, get some blood from me. And he's like, no, we need it from an artery. And I'm like, okay. So I show my neck. He's like, no, we need it from the groin. And I'm like, you need it from where? It's like, we need it from the groin. Mind you, there are people walking past us. The waiting room is right there. Like, we're at the front of the hallway, so the waiting room's right here. And people are walking past us because the bathroom is right past me. So there are people walking past, and he asks me to undress from the waist down to get blood from my groin. So I am horrified, and I start to undress below the waist, and my friend is holding up her coat to try and block off the area because people were stopping to watch. And they stick the needle in my groin, get the blood, and then they leave. And I'm horrified because I was, exposed in the middle of a hallway in a puke spit covered hallway. And they leave for about an hour maybe, and my friend and I are talking and discussing things, and she's just horrified by all of it. And my friend, she was a mom, so her maternal instincts were kicking in. I was a younger woman, and so her maternal instincts were kicking in, and she was trying to keep me safe, and she didn't really know how to do that in this situation. So about an hour goes by, and they come back, and they're like, well, we messed up. We need more blood. And I was like, okay, well, can you get it from somewhere else? And they're like, no, we need it from your groin. So for the second time, I had to undress from the waist down for them to get blood from my groin. And they went to the other side. So I had 2 needles on either side of my groin. And they get the blood, and then they leave, come back, and they say, we need more blood. And I was like, no, you're not getting more blood from my groin. You are done with the groin. And they're like, no, from your fingers. So they start pricking my fingers and getting blood from my fingers, which I'm like, fine, you can do that. Whatever. Then they want me to get a X-ray of my lungs. So they send me over to radiology, and I go into the room, and I'm waiting in the waiting room, and the woman calls me back, and she tells me that I need to strip from the waist up this time. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, okay, I'm not in a hallway. These are medical professionals. They've all seen boobs before. It's fine. It's fine. So I strip from the waist up, and then she's like, we need to go to the X-ray machine, and it was behind a partition. And I look out, and the X-ray machine is in the waiting room. How I didn't notice that when I was sitting there, I don't know, but it was in the waiting room, and I'm like, what? You want me to go out topless into a waiting room of people to get an X-ray? And she's like, yes. So I'm walking out there like this, and the lady's like, you need to put your hands above your head. And I was like, do I have to? And she's like, yes, we need a picture of your lungs. And I eventually had to go into a happy place and pretend that I wasn't where I was. And I lifted my hands over my head so that they could take an X-ray of my chest in front of about 20 other people that I didn't know. So that was fantastic. Then they tell me, come back tomorrow and we'll give you the results of everything that we have found. So I go home with my friend, and we come back the next day, and they take me into a room, and I had my native friend with me as well. And they assumed because she was there that I did not speak the language. And so they were talking to her about things, and then she would ask me questions in English, and I would just respond. I didn't really think much about it. And then the nurse comes over to me, and she's like, you need to strip. And I was like, by this point, I had had enough. I was tired, and they had the door open to the waiting room. And I was like, could you please shut the door? And they were like, I don't understand why you're being so squeamish. Just take your clothes off. And I start crying, and they decide, well, I start crying because I've had enough. Like, the last few days had been horrendous, and I just was so tired of being treated like dirt. And so I was slowly taking my clothes off, and the nurse walks up to me and she screams at me, and she says, the doctor told you to take your clothes off. And I started screaming back at her in their language. I know. I'm not stupid. I heard him. They were both shocked that I could speak their language. And so I get stripped. I'm crying on the bed. And they just leave me there without a top. And so I'm trying to cover myself up because I'm like, they're not looking at me. So there's no reason for me to be naked. So I'm trying to like put my coat over me or whatnot. And the nurse comes back and she's like, he told you to take it off. And she rips the coat off me. And so I'm just bawling. And then they're both whispering to each other. They're like, oh, I think she's depressed. I don't think there's anything wrong with her. I think she's depressed. Which then got me even more because I'm crying. And I've just had enough of everything that had been happening in the last little bit. And I turned to him and I said, I'm not depressed. You've just treated me like crap. And they were shocked. And I normally wouldn't speak that way to people, but I had had enough. And after everything that happened, I did not get a diagnosis. I ended up going to a different country to go to a different hospital to get seen there because I had had enough of what had happened to me at this hospital. So now I can look back at this story and find the humor in it and laugh at it. But it took years and years and years of me dealing with the trauma of this experience. And for some people, trauma never goes away. It will never become funny. It will never be a story that they can find humor in. And that is the truth about medical trauma. And I'm going to go into more detail about what medical trauma is, things like that. But I just wanted to tell us an experience that I had in another country with the medical field. And it's a horrendous experience. That wasn't the first time I went to the hospital in that place. I twisted my ankle earlier and had to go in to check to make sure that I hadn't broken the ankle. And that was another hilarious story that's funny now. It was not funny then. But if you are going through trauma when it comes to the medical fields, know that you are not alone. This is a very prevalent experience that many people have gone through. So you are not alone. And even if you never get to the point where you are okay with the things that have happened to you, there's nothing wrong with you. You are okay. You don't need to feel ashamed of the fact that you went through trauma. It is something that unfortunately is frequent. So don't feel ashamed or guilty about that. You are wonderful and you were in the right for going to the hospital. So don't get down on yourself. I hope that you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane with me and that you found some humor in it, or at least some horror in it. If you would like to continue the journey with me and learn about chronic illnesses or life with chronic illnesses, then go ahead and click that subscribe button and go ahead and click that like button if you did enjoy this video. Remember to be kind. Kindness is free, so give it out to everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye.